Hello and welcome to another game design video. And in the last game design video, we covered the three C's of game design: characters, controls, and cameras. I really felt like we should really dive deeper onto these subjects in their own dedicated video. So we're going to start looking at cameras in video games. Now, cameras come in apparently all different shapes and sizes. From the top-down havoc that is in games like Hades, where you're battling through the bowels of hell, fighting demons, to running really fast as Sonic the Hedgehog through a chemical plant zone at super high speeds, to fighting the Locust Horde as Marcus Phoenix behind his shoulder, keeping an eye on the battlefield ahead of you. No matter the game, cameras serve great purpose. And we could go into lots of detail about cameras and what we can do with them, but I want to focus on one particular aspect of cameras, and that is going to be information. Cameras in games serve the most important role, which is to give information to the player. Beyond just the visuals and showing the player the world that they're in, they can be used to determine what the player should be doing next, what they should be looking out for, different threats they could encounter, and also the level around them, how they can navigate it. Now, not all games genres suit every type of games camera. There are typically three types of camera. We have first person, we have a dynamic third person, and we have a fixed third person. So something like Hades, for example, would be a fixed third person camera, whereas something like Gears of War would be a dynamic third person camera, where you can move the camera around based upon your inputs. As I say, not every genre suits the camera. For example, if you were to play Super Mario in a first person perspective, you lose all that information you're getting about what's ahead of you, what kind of things you've got to look out for, what jumps you've got to make, what items there are, what enemies there are. You lose all of that information because you're in a first person point of view. So just because there's novelty in trying to make a game into first person, keep in mind about the information you lose. For example, Pac-Man would be a very different game in a first person perspective. You need the information about where the ghosts are, where the fruit are, and where the super pellets are. Now, of these three types of cameras, the hardest one to really pull off correctly is the dynamic third person camera. Third person camera that's dynamic means the player has full control over it, meaning they have the authority to decide what they are looking at, making it harder for us level designers and game designers to ensure that the players are getting the information that they need. So, what are the common things that we need to make sure we can do to help them avoid this? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that the games avoid breaking line of sight. A camera should always be in view of the player character. We never really want to break the player character away from the environment, away from the gameplay, away from the player's eyes, because it means there's more risk and more danger, and it just breaks the immersion of the game. So instead, we come up with different alternative ways of fixing that by either pushing the camera closer to the character when they go near an object, or moving the camera away dynamically using something we call raycasts or whiskers to move the camera around objects for us. But it's important that if the player wants to go a certain way or turn the camera a certain way, we can never take it away from them and always give them that option. This is why when you're playing a third person action game, the camera will have some movement on its own automatically, but when you are controlling the camera yourself with a stick, it will override that movement. And in Unreal Engine, we have a tool already in there that helps us a lot with what we want to do with our camera, and that's the spring arm component. In our third person character blueprint, we can find ourselves having a spring arm, or what they've called the camera boom in this instance, attached to our character. Now you can see it's attached to the 0, 0 on the character, which is by the hip basically, and it's got a camera on the end of it. This gives us the control of moving the camera and pivoting it around the player. Your camera should always be centered around your character, in a third person context at least anyway. But the way they do a spring arm is in the name. They'll push the camera closer to you if it is being occluded by an object, such as this wall. Now, this is a setting you can control and can turn off inside a spring arm. You can find it in the spring arm's details panel. You'll see do collision test, and you can turn that off. Now, if I go in here, we can now clip through the wall instead of being pushed through it. But as you can see, breaking line of sight is very jarring and not very good for the player. But what about a camera that moves on its own automatically based upon what's going on in a level using these raycasts or whiskers? Well, if you want to know how to do that, I'm going to make a separate video all in Unreal Engine to show you how to set that up in Unreal Engine. You can watch that in the link below in the description, and you can follow along there. So let's take a look at the shooter Gears of War. The camera here is positioned over the shoulder of the character. Why the shoulder? Why not directly behind them? Well, that's because it gives the player more view of the battlefield ahead of them. They can see more of the screen. Notice how he is pushed into the corner of the screen even when he's aiming down sights, giving the player maximum view advantage. The camera will happily swap sides as well to allow the player to see more of the battlefield based upon which way they're facing, as noticed here when we're in cover. And when we go into cover, we can see the camera getting pushed even further to the side if we are behind cover, this giving the player far more view of the scene around them. You'll notice this when you go up against columns and barricades like these, the camera will go higher or just move to the side to give you a greater view of the battlefield ahead. But what about this close distance to the player character? Well, the reason why you have this is to bring the player closer to the character, make them feel far more connected, and make them feel like they're part of the action. This also helps alleviate the problem of line of sight breaking issues. Because the camera's closer to your character, it has less chance of a line of sight breakage. As mentioned before, cameras are all about giving feedback to the player too. Notice how the camera shakes with the gun as it rattles. This is to give the greater feeling of impact as the gun is being fired, and bigger, stronger weapons will have even greater shake. Notice that when we pick up items, the camera bends down to look at the item we're picking up. Forcing the camera to look down as you pick up means the player has to strategically decide when they want to pick up items. Rather than just being to magically hoover them up off the floor, they have to decide when they want to look away and pick up an item from the ground. Another aspect of Gears of War is the roadie run. The camera gets lower with the character and makes them juggle a lot more, and this gives the impression of a camera guy that's following the character through this war-torn environment. This gives the game a documentary kind of feel and makes you feel like you're actually there with the characters, following behind them and watching them and filming their action on the screen. Now, we want games to be enjoyed by many, many people from all over the world. And we always think of ways how we can communicate to the players without relying on words. We look at things like images and feelings and sounds, and the camera is just one of those great tools that we have that allows us to convey information to the player. Now, there's a lot more to cover regarding cameras, and if you want to know more about camera work and more about how to use cameras in Unreal Engine, please leave a comment below. I'm happy to go through even more content discussing cameras in a lot more detail. Oh, and that, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this game design look and you want to see more game design videos, head over to patreon.com/Ryan Laley. We can find all my videos early from just $1 a month, as well as take part in our monthly creator challenge. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Thanks everyone.